God has a plan for your life. I was 3 years old when I was called to the ministry. A God-sized faith means having a God-sized mission. What does all this stuff even mean? Does God actually call people? And if so, then is the way we talk about calling in church actually helpful? Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, my name is John and welcome back to the channel. Today, we are beginning a brand new series, The Calling Question. In this series, we're gonna look at many of the ways that we talk about mission or purpose or calling within the church. And specifically, we're gonna examine a lot of the questions that we are taught to ask. What's God's plan for my life? Where's God leading me to go? What's God calling me to do? We're gonna talk about how many of these common questions are actually pretty unhelpful, and instead seek to replace them with questions that are maybe a bit more beneficial when discerning a calling from God. So perhaps let's start with the most basic question. A question that I get all the time. A question that I used to ask all the time. What's my purpose? If you grew up in church or attended a youth group or maybe a campus ministry, you no doubt have wrestled with this question before. You heard other people tell stories about when they were called or heard them talk about their purpose and their mission. And if you were like me, you were pretty jealous of their clarity, like God had somehow downloaded a divine mission statement into their brain. And if you're like me, you dove into the scriptures with the expectation that if you just read and reflected enough, then you too would find an individualized mission or purpose for your life. The problem is, that doesn't exist. Nowhere in the Bible will you find a personalized mission statement for your life from God. This is why I think what's my purpose is a pretty unhelpful question to start with, because it places an expectation on God, and specifically on His Word, that it never claims to fulfill. A better question that I would propose as a starting place in this calling conversation is, what is God's purpose for humanity? That is made very clear in Scripture. In the beginning, God creates everything, including human beings. And at their creation, God gives human beings a mission, a calling. You might even call it a purpose. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, it says, God blessed them, meaning human beings, and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves along the ground. So at the beginning of the creation account, we learn that God is the creator, the provider, the sustainer, the caretaker for everything. God is in charge. But then at the end of the creation account, when God creates humans, it seems like God starts to do some divine delegation. It would seem from this verse that there are certain things that God does that He also expects humans to do. Scholars refer to this as humans being co-creators, co-rulers, or partners with God. And the Hebrew word for rule in this verse is the word radah. One Hebrew scholar defines radah as to actively partner with God in taking the world somewhere. This is the original calling and purpose for all of humanity. To, as Tim Keller says, share in doing the things that God does in creation. To take the raw material of this world and to rearrange it in order to make it most fruitful, to draw the potentialities for growth out of the soil. So, this is God's purpose for all of humanity, but what does this have to do with you and me? How are we to translate this expansive calling to the entire human race into our lives individually? Well, to put it very simply, your purpose is to partner with God. As a Christian, we are to think of our activity in the world or our work not as autonomous or self-serving, but rather as a partnership with the divine in carrying out His purposes for humanity. For example, God desires to lead His people forward in faith. And so I, as a pastor, partner with God in doing that work. God also desires for every child to be loved and accepted and have a home. And so my friends, Amanda and Eric, or Hannah and Connor, partner with God in doing that work as foster parents. God desires for every human being to be healthy and whole. And so I have friends like Caleb who partner with God as an ER doctor, or Nathan who partners with God as a therapist. Your purpose is to partner with God, to find the work that God is doing in the world, and then ask, how can I, with my unique skills in my city and situation, best partner with God in accomplishing the type of work that leads to flourishing in the world? And to help you begin to wrestle with this question of how can I best partner with God uniquely where I am, we have a next step practice available in the description down below. Highly recommend you check that one out. But until then, my prayer for you is that your eyes would be opened to the work that God is doing, and that you might find the courage and the wisdom to partner with Him in it for the good and growth of all people. I love you all. Keep being awesome.